in Sudan fighting for freedom and democracy. Just briefing about the Sudan Doctors Union. It was established in 1948 in Sudan, and it is well known for the role that it played in democracy and change in the 60s and in the 80s. The Sudan Doctors Union branch in the UK was established in the late 70s, and the Sudan Doctors Union in Ireland was established in 2017 as an independent branch. We work together in partnership. Our role is the welfare of our members, but as well we support our colleagues in Sudan, in particular for issues related to healthcare and poor governance, lack of transparency and corruption in Sudan that has affected the health services. The latest WHO statistical report in 2018 have showed clearly that the mortality rate in relation to maternal mortality rate or neonatal mortality rate or death from suicide have increased, and it indicates that there is no commitment from the current regime towards health services or the health for all, which is a human right for people of Sudan. Today in this press conference, we would like to highlight what is being happening during the Sudan uprising and the doctors at the front line. And we would like as well to highlight the role of the Sudanese Professional Association and other groups that have been participating in the Sudan uprising. The program will continue different statements. The first statements will be by my colleague Al-Farazdak Hassan, a senior clinical fellow in neurosurgery. And we have as well Fabian from MedAct, who will as well talk about their support in solidarity with health care professionals in Sudan. We are awaiting my colleague, Dr. Wael Mohammed, the SDU president. He has been flying from Dublin, coming on his way, but there are some issues in transport, but he will join us soon. Following the press conference, we will open the ground for Q&A for an hour, and then we will have a break, and then we will continue on the second part.
Good afternoon, everybody. If we can all put our mobile phones maybe on the silent mode, please. If you can put the mobile phones on the silent mode, please. Good afternoon, everybody. Al-Frazdak Hassan, I'm the Vice Secretary General of SDU, giving the first part of the SDU statement. We, the Sudan Doctors Syndicate and its branches, Sudan Doctors Union in the UK and Sudan Doctors Union Ireland, are deeply concerned about the deteriorating humanitarian situation in Sudan. A nationwide uprising started on the 19th of December 2018, demanding the unconditional departure of Omar al-Bashir and his regime. Unfortunately, the regime responded aggressively with brutality and violence against peaceful protesters, rather than any attempt to address people's legitimate concerns. Doctors in Sudan have been at the front of this popular uprising with other Sudanese professionals. There is an ongoing strike by doctors all over Sudan, which is in its second month now. This makes it the longest in the country's history. The strike excludes emergency services, newborn or neonatology services, the pediatric service is excluded as well, obstetrics, critical care or intensive care services, and the renal dialysis units are excluded. We are extremely worried at the significant escalation in intensity of violence towards doctors in Sudan. On the 30th of December, doctors were attacked at Al-Ubaid Hospital. They were beaten with sticks and subjected to physical punishment, detention, and harassment. This was followed a week later by a more violent attack at Durman Hospital on the 9th of January, where the government militia forces used live ammunition within the hospital premises. Not only that, they also used tear gas in the emergency department, affecting both patients and healthcare workers, as we've seen in the video. Doctors were also attacked when organizing peaceful demonstrations in front of their hospitals in solidarity with their people. For example, what happened at Ibrahim Malik Hospital in Khartoum, where some doctors were arrested, their cell phones were confiscated, and every health poster was either taken or torn. And doctors were forced to end their demonstration. Dr. Babikir Abdelhamid, 27-year-old, was treating injured protesters and saving lives when he was killed on the 17th of January. He was shot at the chest in cold blood by the regime's security forces when he identified himself as a doctor. This was a clear message from the regime to doctors in Sudan. There remains a large number of doctors, organizations, leaders in detention for almost 2 months, with over 3,000 detained peaceful protesters and activists. There are worrying numbers of confirmed acute renal failure cases, which is unprecedented before. This is in people released from detention due to dehydration and rhabdomyolysis due to the torture, which is a medical condition that results from the breakdown of muscle cells, leaking toxic material, affecting your kidneys and causing them to shut down. The Central Committee of Sudan Doctors and Sudan Medical Syndicate continue to provide first aid to peaceful protesters. Doctors in Sudan on strike continue to provide emergency care in hospitals while being pressured with threats of legal actions against them by the Ministry of Health. The Sudan National Medical Specialization Board, which is an academic body that regulates doctors' training in Sudan, unfortunately has been used as a tool to threaten doctors and force them to withdraw from strike. We pledged a letter distributed to medical trainees in Sudan to sign and to stop their strike. Luckily, these measures by the Specialization Board were met with great refusal by the academic committees in the Sudan Specialization Board itself. And most of the scientific and academic committees have produced public statements supporting their trainees' right in strike and asking the Specialization Board to distance itself and respect the trainees' wishes. Even here outside Sudan, several members of the SDU UK and SDUI standing in solidarity with their colleagues in Sudan have been targeted with cyberbullying and threats that were considered serious by the UK police. We have witnessed the breakdown of the healthcare, education, and economic systems in Sudan. This hindering any type of development. Sudan transport systems have completely broken down. All attempts to progress have completely stopped. In summary, there is no hope for reform, progress, or sustainable development under this regime. Democratic change is what the people of Sudan call for. Gentlemen and ladies, as we meet today, the regime's militia forces are cruising around residential areas across all of Sudan in cars that do not have license plates and wearing face masks. This in itself demonstrates lawlessness and a regime fearful of taking responsibility for its actions and being accountable. They continue to frighten civilians, breaking into homes, using tear gas within confined spaces, harming elderly people and children, beating women on the streets and in detention centers. They harass them and ignoring the nationwide calls for freedom, peace, and justice. The continuous oppressive use of live ammunition, tear gas, torture, illegal detention, and raiding of hospitals, schools, universities, and mosques has not succeeded in silencing Sudan's brave and peaceful protesters. We call for the support of our colleagues, the health professionals in the UK and Ireland, international media, and policymakers to stand in solidarity with people in Sudan to further expose the real story of Sudan uprising, a peaceful resistance with legitimate demands. Thank you.
Deliver her statement.
Should we do the PowerPoint? Assalamu alaikum. Good afternoon. My name is Faryal Awan and I'm from Medak. MEDAC is a collective of healthcare professionals working to provide solutions to the social, political, and economic conditions which damage health and deepen health inequalities. We as well are deeply concerned about the escalation of the human rights situation in Sudan and the deliberate targeting of healthcare workers by security forces. We responded to a call by the Sudan Doctors Union UK branch because we believe that when the health system becomes the center ground for conflict, it is our responsibility to use whatever political voice we have to call for action. We also believe that when the public health infrastructure is dismantled through intentional underfunding and privatization like is happening in Sudan at the moment, it moves us away from the international goals of universal healthcare provision. We have made a public statement urging the UK government to make a diplomatic intervention to call on the Sudanese President Omar al-Bashir and his regime to end its brutal use of force in the face of protests. So alongside the Sudan Doctors Union, we organized and delivered a letter to the Foreign and Commonwealth Office. If you go one slide back, please. And this letter was signed by over 200 healthcare workers, and we asked for 4 things. We asked for the UK government to intervene to end the use of violence, including shoot-to-kill tactics by Sudanese security and military forces against peaceful protesters. We also called for support of a UN-led independent inquiry to investigate the killing of peaceful protesters. And we asked the government to intervene to end the targeting of Sudanese medical professionals, including through arrest, wounding, killing, and the storming of hospitals by security forces. And lastly, we asked to intervene to ensure the release of peaceful protesters, including the aforementioned medical professionals currently in detention. And this letter was signed by over 200 healthcare professionals. You can find it, it's right in front of me. It's in Arabic and in English if you're interested to read more. Unfortunately, we have yet to hear back from Jeremy Hunt, so we've asked our members, healthcare professionals, to write to their own MPs, reminding that we haven't heard back from Jeremy Hunt and to ask for these 4 demands. And if you go to the next slide, you'll see that a letter from us was also published in The Guardian. The director of MEDAC, Gapi Bola, it was published 2 weeks ago. And if you go to the next slide, please. So a bit about MEDAC. We're a global health charity and a membership organization of healthcare workers. Our mission is to support health professionals from all disciplines to work together toward a world in which everyone can truly achieve and exercise their human right to health. We grew out of the medical peace movement. We were formed in 1992 as a merger of 2 organizations that campaigned against nuclear weapons. The organizations were the Medical Campaign Against Nuclear Weapons and the Medical Association for the Prevention of War. But since 2013, our mandate has expanded quite a lot because we recognize the need to incorporate the health threats posed by climate change and other structural violence of economic policies. So in 2013, we relaunched and we've got 4 different program areas: peace and security, economic justice, climate and environment, and the 4th is human rights. We see the arms trade, war, and conflict as a very, very serious threat to war. International defense and environmental policies continue to contribute to insecurity and instability in the global south, and we believe it is imperative that we do advocacy and solidarity work. We have precedent in solidarity work with healthcare workers and impacted communities in the global south, and our solidarity work, like this time, it always centers the communities that are affected most by conflict. So some past examples are through our human rights program, we routinely campaign for the rights of prisoners and detainees. For example, in May 2017, we stood up for the rights of Palestinian hunger strikers in prisons, and we wrote letters to the British Medical Association and the World Medical Association to intervene in the use of force feeding. We have similarly raised awareness about the plight of doctors in Bahraini prisons. We've also coordinated a lot of solidarity work in Yemen, asking for the UK to suspend all arms sales to Saudi Arabia. And we've also showed solidarity with communities affected by the dam collapse in Brazil. So we would like to keep raising awareness about the situation in Sudan and to keep showing solidarity with our brothers and sisters in Sudan. As a colleague from the Sudan Doctors Union reminded us about a Sudanese proverb which goes, "The bullet does not kill, what kills is the silence," and we refuse to remain silent. So to that end, we have 3 future actions. What we're planning to do is we keep asking our members and our staff members to show solidarity with people who are protesting weekly at Trafalgar Square, so we keep asking our members to go to those protests. We've also drafted letters, like I said earlier, for our members to send to their MPs asking for those four demands. And we're also organizing, one of our members, MEDAC members, who's a Sudanese medical student, she's organizing an event at St. Bart's Hospital in the end of late March. I can send you details if you're interested. And any ideas of, if you have, of how we can support, how the UK health professionals can support, please do let me know. Our business card, our card is right here. Just contact us in the office or let me know today what we can do. Thank you very much for your presentation.
We're still waiting for Mr. Wael Mohammed, the SDUI president, who's stuck in traffic. He flew today from Dublin, but so we are going to open the floor for questions. We would like, if you would like to ask a question or make a comment, just introduce yourself and the organization so that we can answer.
My name is Maddie Crowther from Waiting Peace, for an organisation that works on Sudan. I know that you haven't heard back from Jeremy Hunt, but we've been doing something similar to MedAct, asking Sudanese across the UK to write to their MP, and we have heard back from his relevant minister, Harry Baldwin. The letter we received suggested that they probably are going to be going ahead with strategic dialogue, talks, which is the kind of nickname that in the Foreign Office for these bilateral talks that they've been holding for the last few years that are intended to normalise ties with the Sudanese regime. And the letter we received suggested that those probably are going ahead in May. I just wanted to ask the people on the panel their views on that, whether they think that is good enough at this time. Certainly my views would be that this is not the time to be talking to only the government as a kind of legitimate and credible partner at this stage. But their view, the UK government, seems to suggest that this is a viable mechanism to raise human rights concerns. I really would invite the views of the panel.
Yusra Bahmed for Channel 4 News. Hi. I know there have been 4 verified deaths from torture in the last 2 weeks. What medical proof have you received to show that they've died in detention? What force was used against them, basically?
Thank you, Manny, and thank you for Waiting Peace for always supporting the Sudanese diaspora in the UK. In regards to the continuation in the strategic dialogue, this is very disappointing for us. We feel that the regime has lost its mandate. The government, the people of Sudan are asking for this regime to step down and hand over. Therefore, the least that the British government should do is to freeze the strategic dialogue at the moment. They have to remember that this regime, or the continuation of this regime, is not in the best interest even for the UK and the regional and international community. Therefore, it is very disappointing that they are going ahead in May with the strategic dialogue.
Thanks, Yusra. Regarding the deaths as a result from torture, we have the famous case of Ustaz Ahmed Al-Khair from Khashm al-Girba, who was a young school teacher who was tortured to death. Initially, the government officials tried to deny that and say he was poisoned with a food poisoning. Anyways, the reports from the hospital were very clear with the death certificate as the cause of his death. There was evidence on his body, and we have copies of these reports. from the forensic medicine, and there was clear evidence of torture on his body. Again, the government officials came back and they reversed their statements and they confessed that he was tortured, in fact. There is clear evidence of enormous torture going on in secret detention centers. Nobody can deny that. As I said earlier, there were reports of acute renal failure due to rhabdomyolysis, a serious condition that arises from the breakdown of your muscle cells. So that tells you the amount of torture that people are subjected to. And these people who have these acute kidney failure conditions, of course there are doctors among them. Two of them are being hospitalized in Medani Renal Hospital. One of them is Dr. Al-Hori, a pharmacist. And the two doctors who were actually in detention with Ustaz Ahmed Al-Khair from Khashm al-Girba were treated in Khartoum with renal failure. Thank you.
It was a personal statement, isn't it? The police prisoners with Ahmed Al-Khair, they actually gave a personal statement of the torture, and they witnessed it all from the beginning up to the death. So sorry, just to add to what you say, because you were asking for evidence. So in case of Ustaz Ahmed Al-Khair, who's a teacher, as you mentioned, the colleagues who were with him in prison in Khashm al-Girba, the small town in East Sudan, they have witnessed throughout the torture. And one of them is his uncle. And when they came out, they've actually talked freely, and they've said exactly what has happened to them and to him. And when he died in the car, when he was actually transported from Khashm al-Girba to Kasala, which is the biggest city, nearest big city, he died there in front of them, in front of one of them, and they had to bang on the car, back of the car, to ask the driver to stop. And even then, they had to bang by whatever they were carrying, whether it's a Kalashnikov or something else, just to test if this body will move or not. So this is the way that we're being treated as human beings. And I'm sorry to say, but if we're sitting here and the British government cannot actually say anything in opposition to that, then we're being told we are being treated as non-humans, because even dogs and cats are being treated far better, right? So it's all good that we go through the political channels and we write letters and we wait for responses, but we need more of passion and interest in human lives, nothing else. Let alone asking for peace or freedom or a better economy. We have to speak under, and most of us are British citizens, whether they actually give any care regarding human life. So the people of Sudan have done more than what they could do. They go out in the street on a daily basis, not knowing whether they will come back or not, and it's happening. We are giving one human life every single day since these protests have started. It's a revolution, okay? So people are doing their best. We are trying here to do our best as well as Sudanese professionals or non-professionals living and maybe citizens of the UK as well. So when we communicate with our government, with our MPs, the talk should be at the level of we are here being treated badly because our original home country and our people are being neglected totally by everybody, abandoned. So when you are communicating with a regime who is being proven internationally to be criminals and dictatorship, right? Because they are fulfilling their duties
Okay, and everybody understands that, and nobody is actually denying that, including the British government. They know that it's in their best interest for the Bashir regime to remain in power. But we are saying we are the power. We are the people of Sudan. We are the power, and we have the future. And we can fulfill this interest in a better way, in a just way, which will actually make us proud of ourselves to be Sudanese of British origin or British of Sudanese origin. This is how the world needs to look at us in a different eye. We are not just one another African country in chaos.
Thank you, Ahmed.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. Welcome, Wael Mohammed, the Sudan Doctors Union. Dr. Farouk, the fourth speaker has just arrived. Wael is the elected president of the Sudan Doctors Union in Ireland. Welcome, Wael. He came all the way from Dublin and was stuck in traffic. So he will go to deliver his statement, and we will listen to his statement, then we will go back to questions, if that's okay. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody, and I'm sorry for being late. Thanks, Sarah, for hosting this event, and thanks everybody for coming. Thanks, Sarah, for hosting. Thanks, everybody, for coming, and thanks for the SDU for the organization. I'm just going to talk. I have three messages here. The first message is to state what we know so far. From Amnesty most recent data, and actually I'm afraid that there's no most recent data in the current climate. Basically, the figures we had yesterday when we were preparing for this is no longer valid. Just people are dying, they're getting injured, and they're getting detained. This is a matter of fact. But according to the list that we have from the most kind of reliable source of human rights societies and organizations, about 45 people lost their life since December. That's a matter of fact. The number might be a little bit up, but that's the most kind of agreed upon number that we have so far. About 3,000 people at some stage have been detained in the last 2.5 months. We know, and according to Amnesty Group, that at least 1,500 are still in the National Security Forces detained centers as we speak. About 47, and let's not forget them, 47 Darfurian students have been accused falsely of and depicted that they're source of violence and criminal offense by the current regime. Let's not forget that. The fate of those people who've been abducted for nothing wrong they've done and depicted in front of cameras and media outlets in Sudan that they've done wrong. Let's not forget about them. On top of those numbers, we know that for a fact that the Sudanese government have conducted a very ruthless raids on hospitals and attacked politicians, medical staff, as well as civilians, as you know. The first message that I want to conduct is that we are very concerned by the barbaric tactics that the government is using currently for the past 2 or 2.5 months against our Sudanese people. We're very, very concerned. This is the numbers will tell, the figures don't lie. 20 people lost their life in the first 2 weeks, and that number doubled subsequently. These barbaric tactics varied from the way that they treat civilians, the way that they treat protesters, and the way that they conduct the policies of the national security forces in general since the start of these uprisings. We know for sure that the government is entertaining and implementing policy of shoot to kill, and that is very manifested and evident by the number of people who have been targeted by live ammunition and by gas canisters directed to their heads, neck, and torso. So this is a very serious policy, and it's very barbaric. This is not a government who's seeking dialogue. This is a government who is trying to execute its people. The second message that I want to conduct is that we are very troubled by the number of detainees, including our colleagues in the Sudan Doctor Union. They, as you all know, they attacked, they abducted, they arrested a number of executive committee of the Sudan Doctor Union. They attacked and abducted Dr. Mohammed Najil Assam, Central Committee of Sudanese Doctor, immediately after he appeared online as a representative of the Sudanese Professional Association. The number is rising, and we have huge amount of concern, especially that some of those colleagues have health issues. Some of them are currently under treatment for cancer, and this is very serious. This is a government you can't trust to conduct a normal management of civil society, let alone behind closed doors with those detainees. The number, as I mentioned, is close to 1,500, and unfortunately the fate of some of those, or most of them, is unknown. The third message that I want to conduct is with regarding to the numbers of breaches and violation of human rights. Basically, the torture of detainees and the mechanism by which they interrogate those detainees. We have reported cases of death related and resulted from those detainees, and most of you know this. Most of you have heard the story of the primary school teacher Ahmed Al-Khair, who lost his life by the hands of those militias. We have other cases confirmed, in total reaching 4. We know that they're beating protesters. We know that they are torturing them, because 2 medical students, or at least 1 medical student, lost his life from University of Arazi by beating to death. Some people reporting that he was beaten by bare fists. Some people say that he was beaten by the end of the shoot guns, and nobody knows. And this is a reality, and this is very, very, very alarming. We have numbers of cases that have been proven to result in acute renal failure, for a condition called rhabdomyolysis, which is a breakdown of cells resulting in kind of overwhelming kidney function that leads to renal failure. And we have so far 2 or 3 cases, and it's usually brutal behavior, brutal handling of the protesters, and dehydration. The attack on hospitals, you've all heard and you've all seen the ruthless attack on Al-Ubaid Hospital and Umdurman Hospital. Some of the media outlets, including the British media, Channel 4, have kindly covered that. You see videos of those attacks on the hospitals in breach of international law, in breach of health and safety, and breach of any concept of sterilization or just basic human hospital management. They breach all of that when they attacked those hospitals. They fired live ammunition within the hospital premises, and they did also fire tear gas at the patients and the co-patients in the hospital. I think my colleagues have probably covered the harassment, the other form of harassment. There is a particular concern about harassment against female doctors and female professions of all age groups, and I think the psychological harassment targeting this group, particularly that females are leading this uprising in Sudan. So they are trying to kind of isolate them. They're trying to kind of harass them. It's a sort of bully and a sort of smear attacks. Our message from the Sudanese Doctor Union, particularly in UK and Ireland, our message is that we want the European Union to have a political will and political drive that is derived from their values. They promote human rights. They want to protect human rights. They want to protect the civil societies to conduct themselves in a certain manner. And I think within these values, it's very reasonable to ask the European Union and all its associated affiliations to put pressure on the Sudanese government, and also to address this in more serious discussion within their centres. We also would like the media, obviously, to shine more light on this. This has been a little bit of a shy attempts here and there on an individual basis, but there's no international media have conducted themselves in a serious manner, I have to say, and it's all been very shy attempts. If you just if you just compare the victims and casualties from Tunisia and Egypt, the first two episodes of the Arab Spring, and if you compare the victims of those two uprisings, very major uprising, very big name, very big media outlets have covered these, and if you compare the casualties in those two countries 7-8 years ago and the casualties we have in Sudan, you'd see the response is just a little bit too shy. Thanks everybody again, and I'm open for questions.
My name is Farouk. I'm a retired psychiatrist in this country for 56 years. I thank you very much, men and women, the leaders of our union, and all of you here. I want to raise a few points. This is supposed to be a press conference. Have we got any reporters from the national press in this country? Have we got any reporters from the BBC or the other television firms? None, of course. So, are they here?
Yes.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, because otherwise we will be talking to ourselves, as we have been for a long time. I come from Oxford. We had a demonstration in January. We managed to get to invite the local MP. What she did, she is a Labour Party MP. What did she do? She sent a representative. We had a meeting in Oxford, also in solidarity of what is going in Sudan, and a fundraising event. We also invited Dr. Dodds, the MP for the Labour MP for Oxford, and she also sent a representative. The Labour Party was supposed to be the party that stands for freedom fighters. Where is it? Yes. I wrote to the Prime Minister, but obviously she's very much preoccupied with Brexit. She will have no time for us. But I think it is the duty of every single man and woman of the diaspora to take it on themselves, to talk to their MP, but more importantly, to write to the BBC, to the other channels, and to the newspapers. The so-called newspaper, left-wing newspaper, The Guardian, wrote three articles about the Sudan, and I'm surprised that they published your letter, because I wrote to the editor, and she wrote back to me, thanking me and God knows what, and told me that yes, we wrote a couple of articles. Then there was another article on the Times. Do you know what they did? Did you know what they did? Rather than consulting with you, the people who are aware of what is happening in the Sudan, they go and consult more. The Sudan, Mohammed Fathi Ibrahim, the great millionaire, because he's got those millions, the Times chose to go and talk to him. Did you know what he said? More in of my generation. When he was a young man, he was a member of the Communist Party of the Sudan. You know what? Apparently his billions now have shielded him from what is happening in the Sudan. Did you know what he said? He said, I think we ought to ask the International Court of Justice to withdraw its indictment of Bashir, so that we can give him a bolt hole, so that he can sit down and escape. We do not want him to escape. We want him to be caught by our people and give him the real justice that he needs. And please write to the guy. I wish I know. I used to have a card from Mount Home, but I don't have it now. Write to him, and write to the Times, and write to every paper, and more important, write to the BBC. I wrote to the BBC, I wrote to the Director General in my madness. He sent me an invite through the complaint department, as saying that the news is left to the news editors. They balance one event against another. They talk every event, every item of the news about Zimbabwe, about Venezuela, about even the Congo, but not about the Sudan. The only thing they talk about the Sudan in the main news bulletin on those 2 months was once and for 1 minute, and no mention of the people who died, the people who were injured, the people who were in prison, and the people who were tortured like that. I've got the copies of yesterday's replies to the address. I'm distributing it to you in the copy tray. Please write. It is the duty of every citizen to write and not to talk to us. Talk to the public opinion of this country. Forget about it.
I would like to welcome we have a few guests at the back as well, representing the Labour Party and representing the Health Social Association. So welcome everybody. Anybody who have any comment or questions, please?
Thank you, Sudan Doctors Union. My name is Hussein Arkumnan. I'm not representing Sudan Call. There are leaders here from Sudan Call, of course. But also I'm a member of the Sudan Call. I'm a politician, but this event is more professional. So let us go to that direction. First of all, it's good we Sudanese sit together and talk about the future of the Sudan. And I am very happy today because now professionals, according to the Sudanese dilemmas, professionals now come to the line. For the more than 30 years, this period, maybe the most active are politicians. But when the doctors come, I know that this is the reliable area. We want to invest this sector, the doctors, their activity in order to propagate our cause and also to disclose what's going on in Sudan. I said in many events that Sudanese people, they should move themselves from the concern square to the influential square to the action square. Now you move to the action square. It is good, but I don't think that only Sudanese Doctors Union in abroad can make something important and efficient on what's going on. So my question is that how your body can make network across the world with the Sudanese, other Sudanese doctors and other professionals. This is the first question. And the other question, have you got any new channels with the political circles in this country? And so what is the result if there is? If no, what's your program, what's your plan? Thank you very much.
Thank you. No,
thanks Sudanese doctors in UK and Ireland for providing this interesting opportunity in order to highlight what's going on in Sudan. You have stated a lot of kind of things about what's going on in Sudan regarding torture, regarding detention, arbitrary detention, and so on. One of them, people who went undocumented, people who are passed away as results of exposing to tear gas in their houses. There is many of them. I think those, they need to be kind of addressed their issues and taken into account of those who lost their lives. What I think, I mean, people in outside, I just came from Sudan 2 days ago. I've been there for almost 4 weeks. I attend most of these demonstrations, and I've seen what's going on exactly. So people in UK or outside, they need not just to rely on international community, because what I believe is the international community has no interest on what's going on in Sudan. Unless the balance of the power is being changed, then people will be looked at. So we need a lot of work to be done in order to make international community aware. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Amna. I was once a doctor in the Paris uprising, and I have 2 points. I want to ask, what is the position of the British Medical Association? And the other thing, anything done, or have you done anything with the WHO? Because use of gas stairs in the hospitals, I think it is something serious. Thank you.
Thank you. I wanted to ask about the use of tear gas, because obviously yesterday there was a death from suffocation from tear gas. What do you think about that? Is it the amounts of tear gas being used? Is it the type of tear gas being used? Is there anything in that could indicate that they're using lethal levels of tear gas? Or is this just sort of the result of continuous concentrations of tear gas? Is there any proof or anything you're hearing from doctors in Sudan?
Hi, my name is Manal Bashir, and I work as a senior energy consultant, energy and sustainability consultant. Thank you, Sudan Doctor Union, for organizing this event. It's just a comment rather than a question. I think we shine off of telling some of the truth about the sexual violence going on in Sudan. There are a huge amount of torture, but equally people are dying because of sexual violence. We have a very good example of teacher Ahmed al-Khair, who was sexually abused and until he died. I think we should bring the attention of the world that there's a huge sexual violence against men and women equally. Teacher Ahmed al-Khair has died as a result of inserting a 53-centimeter rod into his back passage, and which led to tear of the lining inside. And we know that sexual violence is a huge crime that is considered seriously by United Nations Security Council. So I think this is something to be looked at. The other comment is about the international governments and the human rights organizations. My plea to them is that you cannot just sit watching people getting killed in Sudan, and it's very, I think personally, it's very unethical for the whole international world to just keep sitting and watching and giving their back to us, when I'm sure they have every evidence they know to ask this government or regime to step down. So I think we calling the Human Rights Organization, UN Security Council, UK government, and all the governments, international governments, to just intervene and just give us some consideration. And I know it's all about political interests from their side, but there is a humane side of the story here. And I think that we should just get some attention. Thank you.
So we have Hussein asking about the networking in Europe.
So the networking of doctors in general. Now we've been lucky as doctors. There have been some structure already on the ground in Sudan. represented by the Sudanese Doctor Union and the Central Committee of the Sudanese Doctor. As you know, the Sudanese Doctor Union in the UK and Sudan Doctor Union in Ireland are branches of the Sudanese Doctor Union. So the establishment of connection is not related to this uprising. It's been going on for some time. Now, it obviously has been activated and triggered a little bit to kind of maximum capacity. And that also led to establishment, launching of more doctor organizations, committees, and support groups in the Middle East, in Qatar, Saudi Arabia, in North America, in USA and Canada, and also in some of the European countries. Now, the networking is a form of collaboration between all those bodies so that we all feed to the same group of doctors, which is currently is the Unified Office of the Doctors in Sudan. It also serves as a two-way system for the gathering of information, so we know at the same time that the Sudanese doctors in Sudan about any casualties, death, or any threats that they're facing. We are their mirror and their voice to the outside. But also, if there's any sort of collaboration funds or any help aids that we need to conduct, it goes through the same channels. So I think we've been very lucky. Obviously, we're trying to kind of improve that networking. It's not perfect yet, but it's one of the best that I've seen so far.
Thank you. In regards to connecting with political forces in the UK, I think the Sudan Doctors Union and the Sudan Association of Trade Unions, SATO, have been working in collaboration with the political parties and trying to work together to support the Sudan uprising. Because I think unity is very important at this stage so that we can be very organized to support people in Sudan.
Mr. Simon Coveney, the Foreign Minister in Ireland, have conducted a letter to the Sudanese Society in Dublin, in Ireland in general, in support of what's happening in Sudan 2 weeks ago, and he is going to question the Prime Minister, Mr. Leo Varadkar, in the same matter.
I think we have Hashim, welcome back from Sudan, and about there is a lot of missing, people that people cannot account for when they are detained or when they are alive, and this requires a lot of documentation. People are aware of that, but and I think this work should be done from Sudan, but will be supported obviously by the legal advisors here. Victor Amna, we have been in contact with the DNA. They have been invited today. They have published 2 or 3, I think, statements for the Sudan Doctors Union in support of health professionals and as well exposing the torture that's taking place in Sudan. In regards to the WHO, I think it's a tricky question, especially when you remember what happened in the cholera outbreak, when the Sudanese official called it watery diarrhea. And WHO itself couldn't, raise the concern or even declare that it's cholera. So unfortunately, the United Nations organizations at the moment are, most of them do not come open, and they are, they cannot expose what's happening. They're always very quiet. So we're not expecting, to be honest with you, any direct support from the WHO, but we have been in touch with them. I think you have been asked about tear gas and whether it's lethal or whether...
So the information we have so far about the tear gas from activists in Sudan and from doctors in Sudan, the 2 facts are that they are using different tear gas, different manufacturers. The second fact is that some of these are actually expired. But I think from a scientific point of view, the causes of death in those circumstances you're referring to hasn't been established, but my understanding is that the regime, the militia, the security forces are using them. I don't want to say they're using them wrong. There is no right way to use tear gas, I have to say. But they're using them in closed spaces. And this is against every single terms and condition instructions of manufacturers when you're using tear gas. You have to have them in open spaces. And they are being fired in houses, in hospitals, in close neighborhoods, in mosques. So it's very reasonable to assume, now I don't have an answer to your question, but it's very reasonable to assume that the way they're using them basic cause of death in these circumstances.
And the way they aim them as well. There has been blunt injuries as a result of the direct aiming of the tear gas guns. Yesterday there was a gentleman who was hit in the head with sustained an injury to his right eye, and is getting treated from the tear gas as well.
I just would like to stress to Manal that's definitely sexual harassment and abuse and what have been happening in different parts of Sudan for the last 30 years. The government is well known for its brutality, and I think females and males have been subjected to different types of torture. Is there any other questions or comments?
Just one point. In fact, recently yeah, okay, Ali Ragib. One point, I think last week, the BBC, they had a short film conducted by BBC Africa, and it was about torture and the ghost houses, and it was being broadcast here in the BBC. And one of the things they said, there's a new thing near Shandy Center or something like that. They have, yeah, they said they have like a place called refrigerator. So they put people there because they said it cannot be traced as a kind of torture. Are you aware of that, and what is the danger of that thing, which is really, if you heard about it, it is really frightening.
Any other comments?
Well, just to follow up to that, that is a Bolton-based firm. So if people are looking for things to write to their MP about, the fact that a UK company supplied the goods for that refrigeration centre, and that's verified by people who've come out of that centre and said that they have seen UK-made doors, windows, that kind of thing. So that is on record. So I would have hoped that would have been something that the BBC picked up, but maybe they can subsequently, or other media outlets.
Bolton, did you say?
It's based in Bolton, so if your MP is based there, I think that would be another good thing to write to them.
Well, they responded to a journalist who emailed them, and they said that they had sold it to a client, but didn't, a Sudanese client, but they didn't, third-party client, basically, yeah. So no, they can't actually connect them to the government.
But the government should do something.
Yeah, no, but I'm just saying that's why it didn't get picked up, because he's responded.
Hello, my name is Mark Lappert, and I'm come on behalf of the Socialist Health Association, the National Association. And the Socialist Health Association is part of the Labour Party. It existed before the National Health Service, and it helped to advise the Labour Party on setting up the health service in the first place. So it's a very old and established part of the Labour Party. And I can speak on behalf of the Socialist Health Association, which has discussed what's happening in Sudan and has been stunned by the bravery and the courage and the sheer, well, you see some of these videos about the horrific way. You see people casually being shot at and beaten in the street and tear gassed in the hospitals, and people are absolutely horrified by it. So our colleague over there who said that what's happening is having no echo inside the Labour Party at all, I assure you, you are wrong. We are horrified by what's happening, and certainly in areas where, okay, but remember, brother, we are not in government. Sadly, we cannot instruct our foreign secretary to do certain things. But what we can do at the moment is challenge it publicly wherever we can. Use things like the Socialist Health Association, which also has links in with the health unions, because besides the BMA, there's unions like Unite, there's unions like Unison, like the GMB, and so on. So we need to speak to, get some solidarity going amongst British health workers to build support for you. And we also need to use the fact, in my view, that we have MPs in Parliament who are allowed to ask questions of the government and embarrass the government in the questions that they ask, to be quite honest with you. So we want you to help to feed us through with some of the questions you want to be asked in Parliament, and by law, the government has to answer those questions. Our brother here from Ireland has spoken about trying to engage with the European Union. I have a suspicion it might be best done from Ireland at the moment. I have a suspicion that the status of the British MEPs are not quite as high as that of the Irish MEPs. So maybe that is a better path for you, but by all means, let's speak to our British MEPs about it as well and push it as strongly as you can. And my sympathy with you, with your frustration, and I agree, it's not got the press coverage that is deserved. You turn on television every night and you hear about Venezuela, but you do not hear about what's happening in Sudan. We have to make sure we have some sort of equality of coverage. So thank you very much for this, and do feedback to us, and if we can help at all with the press coverage. I'm not sure the Labour Party can manage press coverage particularly well myself, but let's do everything we can.
Thank you.
I think we go to make comments and we will have to break now. About the cell fridge and about the cold cells, we are aware from the SDU, and we have raised these concerns with the Sudan unit in the FCO and with the APG. We have one of our colleagues, Dr. Amjad Farid, has been in these cells. The damage obviously is not obvious externally, but for frail detainees and for older people, it can cause internal damage. So yes, we are aware of that, and I think there's an ongoing investigation about the source of these cells. Thank you, Martin, for standing in solidarity with the Sudan people. We appreciate your contribution and coming today, and definitely we will be in touch, because I think still we are at the beginning of the journey. We will need more support from the British and those who are interested in Sudan issues. I would like to thank you, all of you, and now we're going to have a break for tea and coffee, and then when we come back, we have two speakers, Dr. Babakir Yahya and Dr. Aiza Muhammad Ahmed from Egypt, from Cairo.